Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So basically we were discussing directory services जो कि on premises हैं, and the equivalent version on the cloud is Entra ID. So we know that directory services is used to manage authentication, authorization, and to manage all the organization resources and everything else, right, inside the organization. And same information is synchronized in Entra ID using Entra ID Connect. It's a small piece of software that provides synchronization, and it has specific functionality regarding password hash sync. It can do one-way or two-way, or it can say, or you can set that not to synchronize password hash. And same thing with the users and groups. We need to synchronize users and the related groups. And then you can use the same identity, one identity, right? Either from on-premises and from cloud services as well, right? So it provides single sign-on, one ID password, and you can do all of that stuff, right? And whether you're using like this is Siebel, SAP, ServiceNow, Box, and a lot of other software, right? You can use the same identity, same ID password that you're using on Windows. You can take it anywhere else, right? So that's the very, very good thing in this one, right? That's the idea, that you have one single identity that you're using across all your services. Just a moment, okay? And then we discuss this part, right? For administrators, we want to see who can access what. From the group perspective, from user perspective, we can control access, just like we're doing in Active Directory. App developers, we can hook up our applications with Entra ID so users can use the same credentials, right? And then users can manage their identities, and they can do self-service actions. So for example, if we enable self-service, so for example, right now, in this domain, in this AD tenant, Microsoft has not allowed us to do any changes, right? Because if you look at it, so from on-premises Microsoft.com, it can synchronize to anything else as well. So here it is being synchronized to FDPO, right? And the name is telling us that this identity is coming from actually Microsoft.com. So from on-premises domain, you can send it to different domains if you want to. And again, don't want to go into that thing, why and how it allows and why it happens, but regardless, right? Just to So now if you look at the properties, right, of this one. So usually if it's allowed to modify, you can modify these things. Generally, they don't allow you, organization doesn't allow you to change the first name, last name, right? And similarly, they can allow you generally to change, for example, let's see what is the information. They might say, okay, you can update your mobile phone number over here. You can change your fax number. You can change your address and update your address using self-service thing, right? So administrators doesn't have to worry about it, right? This is called self-servicing. So in the organization, they can allow you this thing, so you don't have to go to admins, and you can do all these things by yourself, right? It's a very, very powerful tool and allows, especially in large organizations, to remove lot of headache, lot of manpower to update and manage these things, right? That's the nice thing. And last but not least, right, what also can happen is that you can take the same tenant and you can go to anybody else and say, I want to use my tenant. You can go to SAP online services, and you can go to Siebel, CRM, whatever, right? And they can say, okay, you want to bring your own identity, and they can allow you to hook up Azure Entra ID services, right? And works out very, very well. So again, regardless of the software platform, regardless of the SaaS service or PaaS service, right? You can use the same Entra ID tenant and use all the services. And it has MFA, multi-factor authentication, and various different things, right, that you can utilize. And we discussed these things, right? What services it allows you to do. Authentication, authorization, self-service password reset, MFA, multi-factor authentication, and many, many different things. It provides, for example, when you're setting up the password, it can set, it can look it up, it can look up from your, just a second, guys. It can look up from your a list of banned passwords, right? And say, okay, this is very close to a banned password. We will not allow you to do that. This is very close to your last 4 passwords. We will not allow you to do that. Various different policies, it can allow you to do that, right? We have seen the SSO already. Also, application management. Anytime, any kind of applications you are developing, you can tie up, right? There are many, many different things. In this one, I don't want to go into too much details, but anytime you have on-premise applications, Azure applications, you have application hosted on third party, you can put Entra ID in front of it to get the single sign-on services, right? It's really, really an amazing suite of services that Microsoft is providing. There are other there are third-party services that compete with Microsoft Entra ID. But anyway, and then last but not least, I mentioned that it supports registration of devices. I showed you my computer. I can show, for example, if I do system over here, this machine is also tied up with the Entra ID, right? So if you look at it over here, again, accounts, and it tells you like, access work and work or school. Accounts, work or school, right? So it tells you connected to Microsoft Entra ID, okay? So from anywhere, you can register directly with Entra ID, and Microsoft will push the policies, okay? And I mean, if you look at it, just to show you some of the policies, over here, if you look in the VPN, Microsoft has pushed the policy of their own VPN, for example, right? Policies that if I need to do VPN, I can do VPN as well. There are some very restrictive services in Microsoft that tells you you must do VPN, right? But regardless, the point is I can do VPN as well with Microsoft, and I can become part on their network, right? This is all pushed through policies. This is the beauty of this one, right? The moment you connect your machine to the Entra ID or to directory services, right? Which directory services means we are talking about on-premises, right? And Entra ID is basically cloud-based, right? Then it can automatically push many, many different things. Same thing if you look at the browser, right? If you look at the browser, let me just open it up. Right? If you look at my browser, it is showing me my emails, my Teams, different things. It's showing me over here. This is also managed by Microsoft, right? It's being synchronized. They're controlling it. It says it's a managed account, right? So they control it that you must use this browser, which is logged in with the policies, and it is the only one that will allow me this profile to use Microsoft services, right? So now, if I do this, for example, this is our internal, basically, right, website, our portal. This is the short name. And again, the nice thing is it seamlessly lets me go into every website, right? This is the beauty of this thing. It knows this is a managed browser and all those things, right? And here, if I go into the settings, it tells you managed by your organization. Some things are blocked already, okay? Not everything is automatically allowed. They control certain policies, right? Oops. So, okay. So this is how things are controlled, software is controlled, and various different things. I showed you one more thing, which is the way to install company software. Sorry, if I say company portal, right? And if Microsoft can publish any applications, what I'm trying to show you is how things are centrally controlled, how things are centrally managed, and how they're able to do all of that, yeah, right? All I've done is I've said, okay, I'm logging into Microsoft, connecting to Microsoft Entra ID, right? It checks my machines. This is my current machine, right? And there are many applications Microsoft has published that allows me to download, install, and use it, right? You can see these are all our internal applications that I can simply install, okay? Many different things, right? We said device tool, it wipes out everything out. Anyway, regardless, this all these things are, right? So this is all stuff published internally that nobody has visibility on. You can see a lot of different things. It shows the that Microsoft has pushed or allowed me to install directly, okay? And gives me a list of all. Anyway, this is what Entra ID allows and allows the company to manage and all these things with certain policies, malware policies, security policies, so they can access company resources. Okay, so that's the idea. So this is all comes under device management, basically. Okay. So basically, if you look at it, this is on-premises ID, on-premises AD, and then AD Connect, Azure AD Connect sync. What it does is, which is now the Entra ID, right? It synchronizes users, passwords, hashes, groups to the Entra ID, or Azure AD was the old name, Entra ID tenant. Okay. Now we have Entra Domain Services. What is Entra Domain Services? This is similar. For example, if I say Entra Domain Services. Now this is the third piece of the puzzle, right, of this whole thing. We have seen Active Directory on-premises AD, and the whole full name was Active Directory Domain Services. That was the name, right? So just to show you, just to put this thing in perspective, we have on-premise ADDS, which is Active Directory Domain Services, okay? And this is on-prem and provides all the services. This gets synchronized to Entra ID Cloud. This gets synced to domain services. Now, why do we need this? Why there is another piece to the puzzle? Entra ID domain services. Okay. So ADDS on-prem, right? It gets synchronized to Entra ID, and Entra ID gets synchronized to Entra ID domain services. You can see the name is common. Okay. And now I'll go back to something that we discussed last time. We said this one talks to, this one uses, it's a directory service, uses LDAP protocol, and port was I think 389, one of the ports. Okay. Now this one was, we said, HTTPS, and this provides authentication, authorization, right? Now here comes the problem that all the applications that are working with this on-prem AD and using LDAP to query and to do various different things, they do not work with this one. So to provide the exact same behavior on Azure, they said, okay, you can use a PaaS service. We'll provide you this thing as a PaaS service, and you can synchronize all the information from Entra ID to Entra ID domain services. And this is again over LDAP. We can sync directory service. So platform as a service, directory service. And now you can see over here, if I do this, so any application that was using or connecting to ADDS over LDAP, and it needs to do that on the cloud, for that Microsoft said you can use our PaaS service that provides you very similar functionality. It has some limitations, but again, it provides you pretty much same functionality. So all the applications on premises which were working before over using LDAP, they can continue to work once you migrate them onto Azure. That's the whole idea. Okay. While this provides you modern services, but it doesn't provide you LDAP based services. So if any service, and there are some of them, quite a bit of them, that requires this one, so then you have to do, you must use LDAP, okay? Just a moment. Then you must use Entra ID domain services. And this is how you create Entra ID domain services. So if I do this, okay, so it is saying I cannot do this one. I cannot do this one, but nothing special. It creates, maybe I'll do it later on with some other account or something, okay? So it says I cannot do that because I need to have admin privileges on my Entra ID on this one, okay? I must be an admin on this one because I need to synchronize information from there to here. But important point on this one is, right, that you can see the arrow. This is a two-way sync as we discussed in the class, as I explained earlier as well. But this one is a one-way sync. This is a read-only domain. You cannot change information over here. Okay? So again, changing information is always from here to here. But this is for applications. This is for applications. This is for applications. Azure ID is the Entra ID, Entra ID, right? That we discussed in the class. Entra ID is the cloud version of domain services, right? That we discussed in the class as well. This is Entra ID. Entra ID only provides these services that we've been discussing, right? And you use Entra ID connect to connect the services. But it works over HTTPS. So any application that needs to work with LDAP, you can create a managed domain controller, domain services, right? Very similar to this one. Again, be very clear on this one. It says run legacy. Managed domain means that not managed by Microsoft, managed by, it's a service that is managed by Azure. So it's a basically it connects with this one, whatever the domain is over here. Managed domain means that over here we are setting up, right? It says without managing domain controllers. So domain controllers are managed by Microsoft. The behind the scenes servers are managed by Microsoft. So it says gains the benefit of cloud-based domain services. Same thing over here. Same thing what you had the domain services on the premises, right? You are doing the same thing, but the domain controllers are managed by Microsoft. Okay, their high availability, their patching, their upgrade, their everything. You don't have to worry about it, right? You just have to worry about connecting your application with port 389 or whatever the required port is using LDAP. So it says run legacy application that cannot use modern authentication standards. When they say modern authentication standards, what they're trying to say is based on HTTPS, right? Read it like that. Modern means those authentication methods which require HTTPS, those applications cannot use them. They must work with LDAP. If that's what they're using, then Microsoft provided this service. They provided this thing as a service over here. So there are certain things that we have to be very clear, that information flows, information gets synchronized from here to here and then to here. You cannot do this. You cannot do from here to here, okay? Let me see if I can do this pointer. Well, it's a security service, right? It's a security service. True? I mean, it's a full-fledged service that is providing over HTTPS. It's not a layer, it's independent service. We only need this one. We only need this one if we have applications on Azure that requires a domain controller, just like on premises. Okay, that's it. So everything is building on each other. So first we said what is a domain, and domain has users, groups, passwords, and other things. And we said we want, and it has compute everything, right? Then we said there's Entra ID. You can synchronize users and groups, and it doesn't have concept of computers and all that, right? And it says you can access cloud applications. So it's an authentication and authorization service, right? And we discussed that it's a cloud-based identity and access management service. Okay. This one is on premises. Entra ID is, for example, is a cloud-based, and Active Directory is on premises, right? So from here, this is the cloud-based, and cloud-based it basically we need to get synchronized the same information, right? So having said that, we have Entra ID Connect. So now these things are clear. Our issue is we said that anybody who's using Active Directory, it uses port 389. It connects over port 389. Okay? Yes, I'm recording it. Port 389, and this is HTTPS. Now you have services and you migrate your data center to cloud, and then what happens is you said, okay, we need same LDAP based domain services. What to do now? So for that, Microsoft said, okay, we will give you a PaaS service for domain services, a PaaS domain service. This is what they did. Okay. So they said we'll give you domain controllers exactly like they were on premises, but we will give you as a PaaS service. So domain controller have lot of functionality and it takes a lot of time to set it up. So they said we will set it up for you. We'll provide you everything. All you need is to synchronize your information there, and you can start using your applications which needed LDAP over here as well. Again, main thing over here is to keep in mind, this is on-premise, on-premise ADDS, this is on-prem, synchronized to Entra ID. This is the old name, the new name is Entra ID, okay? And this one uses HTTPS. And when you're doing migration to Azure, all the applications, you will migrate those applications as well. That will require a domain controller as well on Azure. So Microsoft said we can provide you a domain controller as a PaaS service. So any application that requires that, you have this as a PaaS service. Okay, that's the whole idea. This is the main thing, the second point. This is for those applications, read VMs, think of it as virtual machines basically, that need to be able to communicate with the domain services over LDAP. That's all it is. Okay. No, if you want Microsoft to provide you that, then it is the Entra domain services. Okay. If you want Microsoft to provide you as a PaaS service, then it is Entra domain services. Just like over here. Okay. Entra domain services. Okay. You can see this one, and you can create a new one. This is Microsoft is providing as a service. You can, instead of using this one, I don't want to go into again more complexity, but again, I told you this one that when we talked about domain controllers, you can replicate this one directly as well to provide all the same services, a domain controller in Azure as well. You can replicate. Okay. Again, I don't want to go too much this one into complexity. It's a new topic and a little bit in detail, but again, very simply, we need to understand on-premises AD, ADDS, or a domain controller, what Azure AD tenant is, sorry, Entra ID tenant is, and then what is a managed domain and why there is. That's all. I don't want to go into too much detail. Okay, it'll become confusing. The idea is this second point. This is what you need to remember. Okay, the second point, this is the main thing. First, it is a PaaS service, Microsoft is managing it, and second thing is you can run legacy applications, which means applications that require domain controller, that require to talk to domain controller using LDAP. That's why they are providing you as a service. That's it. This one is being provided to you as a service over here. Okay. But since this requires all the stuff to be synchronized, they said from Entra ID you can synchronize all that information. So understand the route. This is not being synchronized. It's this thing that is doing the synchronization. Okay. Be very clear on this one. So I don't want to go too much into detail. Main thing that you have to understand is that Entra domain services, what they are, it's a domain controller that is being managed by Microsoft, by Azure. Second, why it is there? It is there to when you are migrating to cloud and you have applications that require domain services, you can use this one. Okay, you can use this one. And Microsoft provide you automatic way of synchronizing from Entra ID domains, Entra ID to Entra domain services. That's the main point that you have to understand, right? That's it. There's a whole discussion about this thing, why, how, and various different things, what services, and so on and so forth, right? And what are the alternatives and various different things. But I don't want to go into the details of those things right now. Understand that for applications that require a domain controller on-prem, Microsoft is providing the same thing on the cloud as a PaaS service. That's it. And the way you get the information in this one from on-prem, all the users, is from the Entra AD. Okay? Enter domain, and you can see it's a one-way information. You cannot update users and passwords over here. This is only for LDAP connectivity and various different low-level domain services functionality that Entra ID does not provide. Okay, that's the idea. Now, having said that, again, this is Azure Active Directory. It's the old name. The new name is Entra ID Domain Services. Okay, Entra ID Domain Services. So, Windows Active Directory, AD Connect synchronizes all this information, and then what happens? All these cloud applications can use the Entra ID Domain Services. And sorry, not domain service, Entra ID. Azure Active Directory is the Entra ID. Okay, so all these third-party applications can use this one, and our own business applications, as we mentioned. And I can bring in third-party external identities as well and invite them, just like I did before in the class. For example, external identities. These are identity services you can bring over here as well. Just like, for example, I showed you that if I go into Entra ID, I can bring, when I say add user, I can say user and say invite external user. I'm bringing external identity, whichever identity system it is configured in, right? So for example, I can say this is my Gmail account, okay? I can do this one. And I can invite, okay? So this allows me to invite identities from external systems as well, and that allows them to use all my applications just like a normal user. Okay, I can do this. Is the B2B part, as I mentioned, right? We bring in people from other systems so they can work with us. So a lot of time they are vendors, third-party vendors, which maybe do not have Azure ID, sorry, Entra ID, right? But we can invite them as a users, and then they can use our applications and work with us on projects, right? This is the B2B part, basically. Again, read it. We can go further, we can revise it further as well in the class, okay? Again, it's a new topic, but read it a little bit. I have all the required links. Read it and things will become clear. It's a very new topic and it's not the most straightforward thing, okay? So you need to get your head around this one. But again, concepts are very similar, simple, right? And that's what you need to be very clear about, the concepts, right? So now, just something that is common across all security systems, right? What is authentication? What is authorization, right? So authentication is to determine that it's you who is requesting access, okay? The person. And authorization is essentially, once we have determined it's you, do you have access to this thing that you're requesting access to, right? That is authorization. Okay. So what is MFA then? MFA is again part of Entra ID. And this is basically the philosophy of this one, right? The design philosophy. Something you know, something you possess, something you are. Okay? So, for example, what we know ID password. Okay? Something you possess, we have the device from where we can provide the token. Okay? And based on that, it determines, right? Okay, you are basic, and you can have basically a certificate, right? Yes, this is the person is claiming to be. Okay, so idea is that not just on password ID password, but it's requiring multiple levels of elements to make sure it's you who you're claiming to be. That's the idea, right? So not just ID password, because they can be copied, they can be whatever, right? They can be stolen. They are doing additional level of authentication. And they're bringing other elements. They're very hard to take over. right? There are, if you research internet also, you will see that there are a lot of ways, the phishing attacks that happen for the one-time passwords and various different things that happens, right? But anyway, it makes it harder and harder basically, right? So what is B2B? This is external identities. I mentioned this already. You invite them, and once you have invited, you give them access to your systems internally, right? This is B2B. So Entra ID, again, old name is the Azure ID. I'll try to change all these references as well. Entra ID allows you to bring in people with other identities, partners, vendors, suppliers, and all those things. Once you invite them, you can give them access to your systems. And this is a very, very, very common thing, right? And based on that, they can work on your systems. B2C is, okay, you publish your applications and you protect it with Entra ID. And I showed you this thing that Entra ID allows you to log in with any kind of identity, whatever you require, application requires. You can say Facebook, Twitter, Windows Live, and whatever, right? Gmail, whatever, right? Or and what happens is B2C is what? You publish the application, people come in, they sign up using third-party identities. Entra ID allows you to manage all of this stuff without writing code. So all you do is you register your application. So basically what you do is, if you go into Entra ID, and over here you will see enterprise, I think app registrations over here, okay? And this is how you register apps in this thing. And you provide the URL basically. Let me see if I do test app. I want to show you some of the settings basically in this one. Okay, so far nothing really, right? And you can say what do you want to accept as identities, and you can do certain things. You can provide, for example, logos and graphics and all that. So it gives you a very personalized experience for the application. You cannot see its Entra ID that is showing you all the page and all that, right? But main thing is, and this is the app rules, right? And using the groups and all that. If you're using Entra ID groups and all that, you can do the different roles and all that for the application, admins and regular users and whatever, right? You can do. So it allows you to control all of that. And you just handle that in the application code. It will allow you to, for it to do the authentication and authorization and control all of that. You just handle that in your, that is the user in this role. Again, don't want to go into too much depth of this one. Main thing is that this is the B2C part where you can control and authenticate and protect your application, and without writing code allow you to bring in all the different identities. This is the beauty of Entra ID, right? So when you're writing applications, you can simply do all of this stuff without writing code. So it's a very, very sophisticated and nice service for B2B scenarios and B2C scenarios, okay? So again, B2C is basically for consumer of your application. B2B is people, again, people are, they can bring their identities, but they are working on your tenant and your services as, So you have given them access to your data center once they're invited in the B2B, whereas in this scenario B2C, you have an application that they are bringing in their identities to sign up. And there are many scenarios, right? When you go to like maybe Daraz.pk, you will see that they will say login using Google and various different other things, right? They'll say login using Google or create an account. So this is a very common scenario, right? Okay. So once you have hooked up your application with Entra ID and done the authentication authorization, then comes the very nice part, which is conditional access. This is part of Entra ID service. It basically says, okay, besides the ID password, besides the MFA, is there anything else you want to consider using during login? So for example, if you're logging in from, for example, outside the country, it can deny IP location. So Entra ID can check that, what your location is. Entra ID can check what device you are logging in from. Entra ID can check your various different things, right? And once you have all of this, these are what we consider signals, okay, identity signals. And based on that, you can say it can ask you to do something else. For example, it can say, okay, user doesn't have MFA usually, you can do various different things. Allow access, deny access, require some further action, right? If you want. And then they will be able to access. Okay. So there are multiple signals, which is who the user is, where he's coming from, what device he's using, on and on, right? And based on that, it can determine, okay, I will allow access or deny access. So this is above and beyond the MFA and the ID password, okay? So it provides you that also. There are applications, customer says, if you're not in the country, even though you're authenticated, even though you're authorized, if you're not in the country, you will not be allowed to connect to this service, right? This is how it is done. You can achieve that thing, okay? They can also say, if you have a device, sometimes you will see in the banking application, they will say this device is not registered. You have to register as a new device. This is precisely what this one is, the device part, right? Where they say, okay, we want to, we have seen the, for example, the header that is coming from this. You have not used this one before. We want to do. So another level of, for example, authorization they perform. They can send you one-time password. They can call you, automated call, and say, put this one-time password. They want to make sure it's you who are trying to add this device as an authorized device, right? So you can do all of these things using this. So this is another basically a way of saying this. You will see this is a newer figure from that one and all that, right? So basically some of the scenarios, right? As I mentioned, depending on the role, sometimes the role is admin. You can say, please, you need to do MFA. If you're outside, they can ask you multiple different things, right, to do those things, right, and actions, right. And this is another very common thing. If you are admin, it will force you to have MFA. Regular users, no MFA. Same thing for remote desktop and various different things, right? You can do that. And I mean, same thing as I mentioned to you, for example, in the, let me show you. In this one, there are certain things I can do only from the browser, which is managed by Microsoft. If I'm not using that, it will not allow me to do that, right? For example, I upload your course notes. It will not allow me to upload the PPTs because information is, for example, I've stored it on my Microsoft account, so it marks as confidential, right? So it says you can only upload through a managed browser. So I mean they can do lot of this stuff basically, right? Control how I upload, how I download, what do I do, right? And that gives them, yeah, it is not, should not be right now. This is what you're seeing, right? Can you see this? Yeah, I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. So these are the various different things when you want to control, right? So whenever you have more complex decision making, Entra ID conditional access allows you to do all of that stuff, okay? And these are some of the scenarios, just some of the scenarios, right? I mean, they're endless kind of thing, but these are some of the things, for example. We have seen this one already, right? Role-based access control. So continuing with the security, we have seen. So Entra ID. So now if you look at it, if I go home and I create, for example, if I have, let's say, resource group. Actually, I don't want to create a new one. Let's just do this one. So for example, now I can provide somebody access on this resource group only, right? On the subscription, onto the specific things, right? So now if you look at it, you have users, apps, user groups from Entra ID. I can give them access to anything in any way over here, right? Yeah, this Entra ID, this is called a tenant, right? Think of tenant as a location where you live, and from our case, this terminology means where your organization lives. This is your organization Entra ID tenant. That means this is where your organization lives and all its object lives, right? So that's why they call it tenant, basically. So main thing over here is the role-based access control is based on now Entra ID. Entra ID has all these objects, and you can use all these objects and give them access across various different things in Azure subscription. Okay. So in this one, if I go over here, if you look at the subscription, I have tied my subscription just like this one, right? This one, it is tied to Entra ID. So if you look at it, this one, it is tied to this directory, this tenant. Okay. And nice thing is now if I look at it, if I say add and role assignment, it will allow me to pick anybody from that tenant. Let's say reader. So it will show me all the people from my domain, right? Sorry. You can see different people from, and lot of guests are added over here and all those things, right? And I can pick, no, no, right now they belong to Entra ID. They belong to this. I'm sitting over here. I'm trying to pick somebody from over here to give it access to this over here. Okay. So I went into the subscription. I said I want to pick a user, from here to grant access over here. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, I'm giving him reader access so he can view stuff. Right. So imagine the user came from on-premises either or came from an external identity source, from a third-party identity. He has his identity somewhere else, so it came from over there. Okay. So regardless of it is, the idea is this: you manage all the identities over here in the Entra ID, you hook up the Entra ID as an authorization authentication source to subscription, then all these users are available to you in Azure to give them access, right? This is the beauty of this, right? You have abstracted all the users, right, outside in the Entra ID, and then you basically hook up the Entra ID with Azure subscription. And that allows you to pick any one of those users as a user with whatever rights you want to give it to them in Azure. Okay? Is it clear or not clear? We've been right. So we have seen this part already from all different angles. We are adding users, groups, synchronized, or we are creating over there one-way, two-way synchronization. We have seen this part, right? External identities, we can add different people, right? Just like I added mine. Once you have it, it is managing all the users. Now we are saying this tenant will be protecting our Azure subscription by this one, right? If you look at this one, right? And here you see the tenant. And I can attach any tenant where I have access to. Okay. So nice thing is it abstracts all the user management, all the group management, all the conditional access over here, and then we simply just add the user and give it access. Whether he can log in or not, authorized or not, from his IP location, Azure Active Directory or Entra ID will manage that. Once Entra ID determines that this is allowed, Entra ID will let the person inside the subscription. Azure subscription doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff. This is the beautiful part, right? Now imagine instead of Azure subscription, it's your application. You can get the exact same functionality in your application. You provide all the user access over here, conditional access, everything, and hook up the directory to your custom application. And you get all these services. Azure subscription is nothing more than a web application by Microsoft that they're hooking up Azure Active Directory to it, Entra ID to it. That's it. Same thing, Office 365. Nothing special. Microsoft Office Suite protected by Entra ID identity service, right? So now you can see how things are working, right? The time-based access, that is one a different thing. What we call just-in-time access. Just-in-time access says that if you need access for 2 hours for this thing, we have a workflow for it, right? I think there's a just-in-time access over here. It's somewhere. I will check where do you set up the just-in-time access. But this is under, I think, Entra ID. Let me just check. ये Entra ID के अंदर ही है just in time access. I think it's ये मैंने सेटअप की थी एक दफ़ा. I will check which one it is. Where do you do this one? ये है. यहाँ पे this is called PIM. ओके, ये जस्ट टाइम एक्सेस यहाँ पे आ गई. ठीक है, कि आप उसको कहते हो ये स्पेशल रोल मिल रहा है आपको. यू आर अ रीडर, इफ यू वांट टू डू समथिंग request the access, and then you will get that for a certain period of time. It is part of Entra ID. Yes. Okay. Mhm. नहीं, रिसोर्स तो कुछ नहीं होता, जो आपने काम कर दिया सो कर दिया। क्योंकि लेट्स से एक बंदा है, इट्स वेरी सिंपल राइट। आप कहते हैं खाना पकाने आने उसने, तो आप उसे कहोगे आप किचन में 2 घंटा काम करोगे, 2 घंटे आपके पास हैं, वो 2 घंटे में जो खाना पकाएगा इट विल बी देयर, वो चला जाएगा, 2 घंटे एक्सेस थी उसको राइट। एग्जैक्टली लाइक दिस, वो जो बंदा आएगा उसको एक्सेस मिल गई एक दफा, ही कैन डू वॉट एवर, बट द आइडिया इज कि yes you trust that person to do that work but only for certain period of time, उसके बाद he has no longer access। ठीक है, it's a very very common scenario। idea is this idea is this कि जस्ट इन टाइम एक्सेस कहाँ से आया कि एडमिन्स जो थे वो काम करते थे अपने अकाउंट के साथ एंड दे हैड फुल प्रिविलेजेस। तो इफ देयर अकाउंट गेट्स हैक्ड तो इट कैन हैव वेरी डिस्ट्रक्टिव कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस। तो उन्होंने कहा जी आप अपने अकाउंट के साथ जो काम है वो करें एंड विल हैव मिनिमम प्रिविलेजेस। जब आपने काम करना है रिक्वेस्ट एक्स्ट्रा एक्सेस, वो 2 घंटे आपने काम करना है, 3 घंटे रिक्वेस्ट द एक्सेस, यू विल गेट अप्रूवल। So once you get done, your account will come back to its normal, like a normal user account. This is the idea and philosophy behind it. तो अगर वो account hack भी हो जाता है, it cannot have destructive consequences. This is the idea. Okay? कि आपको उतनी देरी एक्सेस मिले जितनी देर आपने काम करना है उस चीज का। आपको हायर लेवल एक्सेस मिल रही है ओनली फॉर सर्टेन पीरियड ऑफ टाइम, दैट्स इट। Sure, Ji. Now we come to another thing, which is another philosophy of what we call zero trust. Okay? So पहले क्या होता था कि हमने आपने आपका आईडी चेक कर लिया, आपने कंपनी में आ रहे हो, और जब आप अंदर आ गए हो देन यू कैन डू वॉट एवर, एंड दैट हैड लॉट ऑफ कॉन्सिक्वेंसेज। सो बेसिकली आप इफ यू आर एबल टू कम इनसाइड द गेट, राइट, ये ताला लगा हुआ है यहाँ पे, इफ यू आर एबल टू कम इनसाइड द गेट then everything is open. And the zero trust is no, we'll protect everything. Anytime whoever needs to access must authorize that thing, and we will grant explicit access to each person or each identity or each account wherever they need. It will not, everything is locked inside. This is zero trust idea, philosophy of zero trust. Everything is locked. Each thing will open up to the users or groups, user groups who need access. Otherwise, it will be locked for everybody else. Okay? We do not trust anyone, anytime. जिसको access की ज़रूरत है, we'll grant that group of users access. And this thing is very common inside Microsoft as well. There are many, many areas where you do not have access to, and you must request access. You must provide justification. Email goes to manager, he must authorize it. Maybe sometimes VP also, he must authorize it. Only then you are able to they grant you access, right? But regardless of all that, idea is this, that you do not get, just because you're employee of the organization, you do not get access to all the resources. You get only what you need for your role. Anything else, and different people have different roles, so you get access to those things, and besides that you must request access. So just to give you an idea, ये Azure subscription जो है, I did not have access. I requested this. We have internal tool where you go in and request access. Our VP and manager approves, and then it is granted by Microsoft, right? But everybody do not get this service, right? It is a specific roles and with approval of the management, senior management, that you get access to your own Azure subscription with a specific budget, right? So that's the idea of zero trust, okay? There are a lot of things in zero trust, again, for each thing for protection, but here we just need to understand what are the difference in the classic approach versus zero trust. What is zero trust, right? And this is very critical for you guys when you're building your application, when you're administrating your applications, what to do, okay? Now, ये इसकी बड़ी अच्छी explanation है in the link provided, but the idea is, right, that you provide secure each and every level. Each and every level. There's a data is the most protected one, right? So for example, if somebody needs to reach data, you come inside the data center through the identity access system from the parameter network. You have access through the network, through the compute, through the application, and then you reach the data. You must make sure you have all the required privileges and authorization to come to that level, right? So idea is you make sure each and every level is properly protected. जिस तरह हम कहते हैं, for example, now physical security, Microsoft manages to the data center. Identity and access is provided by Entra ID, right? Parameter network is provided by your DMZ appliances like firewalls and those kind of things, right? When you come inside network, you have network level security, right? From the VMs and those kind of things, right? When you come from, for example, firewall to the network, you have specific rules that if coming from this application, you can only go to certain area, right? And to that specific compute. Then compute is also protected. You can only go to the application, right? And from application, it has the connection strings to go to data. You have no idea what is being connected from where to where, right? Nothing is visible to you. So you need to make sure that each and every layer of this defense approach, right, is properly protected. Some will be your responsibility, some will be responsibility of the network people, security people, database people, and for example, and all those things, right? So, but these are the layers that needs to be properly protected in your design and thought process, right? Yep. Not necessarily, right? Generally, what happens when we discuss Azure architecture, the security guys say this. You can say, okay, please make sure application is talking to the database over a secure connection. There can be unsecure connection, but he will say things like this. He doesn't know that what is secure or unsecure connection or how to configure that in the database. But he will say, please make sure this is secure connection. Okay. Second thing he will say is to the network guy, please make sure this application coming from this compute is the only one that can connect to this database, or this one is specifically authorized, because database server is usually common across multiple applications. Not databases, database server, right? A database server can have multiple databases. So this application, so you'll say, okay, please make sure this compute VM is properly authorized to reach this one. That means network is closed. Allow this specific access from the network for this guy. Do not open it up at all for everyone. Allow explicit access. They will say these kind of things. They will also say, do you have antivirus in the application server, right? Where are the logs? How are logs being monitored? How do you know if something is being attacked? How are we getting alerts and these kind of things? So these are the things that the cybersecurity guys discuss and see. They have their own tools. They will say your application must comply with our tools and must provide logging to our tools so we can monitor what is going on, right? And generally in Azure, we have tools that cybersecurity guys start using, right? Log Analytics, Defender, and so on and so forth, right? So Defender is very nice one. So for example, if I look at it, whatever stuff I have in my subscription, it can see, it can monitor and give me lots and lots of information. This is what we call proactive monitoring. Somebody doesn't go and figure out what is the configuration, what is going on. It takes care of pretty much everything, right? So if you look at the recommendations, right, you can see that it is saying that you have some vulnerability, please resolve them, right? And what kind of risk factors are there? Exposure to the internet. He says storage account is exposed to the internet. Please, he says fix it. It's giving you a lot of different things. Okay. It's giving you the issue, the risk level, and all those things. So you don't have to go and figure it out, right? But it is telling you what object it is and what you need to do. Okay. And it has. I want to see. And you can see you can hook up your Azure AWS account, GCP accounts, GitHub, DevOps, various different things, and you can find this across everything. Okay. So it's a very, very nice service, not very expensive. We have some other more expensive services as well. Okay. And you can see also, let's see what this one is saying. Okay, it is saying it has some kind of malware going on. Okay. This one. Let's see, unusual execution of this one. This was the VM. Let's see what happened. Can we see something? View full details. So it says some this IP address. What happened? Some custom script was executed on this one. And it's showing you all of this information, okay? And what happened. So it said monitor, take action. So it gives you a lot of different things, and you can open the logs and see what was done, what script was executed. So it can get you the exactly the point where the thing happened. So it based on its own AI based analysis, it feels something was suspicious, and it's telling you everything that you need to do to look at this one to find out, right? We can open up the logs. Let's see what it tells us, if there are logs, right? So it is giving us what was going on in the VM, something was being done, some script was running and all that. Anyway, we can investigate. The point is it gives us everything to find out what is going on, right? So it's very, very nice tool. And there are a lot of other ones as well. This was a Defender for Cloud, okay? So for example, it tells you across all the applications, high vulnerabilities, medium, low, and I have seen customers, portal like this, right? Customers, and you can see that a lot of stuff is, configured AWS accounts, so it can do cross. It's a multi-cloud application. Since it is a data center level stuff, it is a multi-cloud thing, multi-cloud application that can do all of this stuff. Okay. So it can basically protect pretty much everything, Azure PaaS services, anything happening on Azure. It's not, it's basically होता क्या है. So first, let's understand कि हो क्या रहा है. हो ये रहा है असल में कि, let me just go back. इसने कहा कि VM के ऊपर over here समथिंग हैपेंड. अब दैट मीन्स इसको किस तरह पता लगा? इसको इस तरह पता लगा कि इसका एजेंट इंस्टॉल हुआ हुआ है, राइट? अब नथिंग टू विद एजर. आप अगर एजेंट इंस्टॉल कर दो किसी भी वीएम के ऊपर और ऑन प्रेमिस के ऊपर भी, उसको उससे भी इसको पता लग जाएगा. तो आइडिया होता है, ये होता है कि एजेंट्स इंस्टॉल होते हैं इन सारी चीज़ों के अंदर, एंड दैट्स हाउ यू फिगर इट आउट. अगर कोई पैस सर्विस है उसमें तो आप एजेंट इंस्टॉल नहीं कर सकते. देन इट मॉनिटर्स when the right thing is happening, right event happens, it can find out कि whether it can do क्या कहते हैं malware analysis, antivirus analysis on the data. एंड क्योंकि डेटा जा रहा है वो आपको जिस तरह एजर की सर्विसेज हैं, AWS की सर्विसेज हैं, वो आपको हुक्स देते हैं कि डेटा चेंज हुआ है एंड यू हैव रीड एक्सेस, इट कैन डू एंड मॉनिटर. डिफेंडर भी तो आपको एंटी मेलवेयर दे रहा है, किस तरह दे रहा है? कोई नथिंग स्पेशल अबाउट इट, राइट? So there is nothing special. It's all based on the APIs of the platform. So they have done deep integration with the APIs of the platform to give you the same set of services. अब ये डिफेंडर है, आप खुद भी बना सकते हो. डिफेंडर इज नॉट डूइंग एनीथिंग. अब इनकी टीम है जो डिप्लॉय कर रही है, बट इट ऑल इट इज डूइंग इज इट इज इंटीग्रेटिंग विद द नेटिव APIs ऑफ ऑल द सर्विसेज. तो थर्ड पार्टीज भी हैं जो सर्विस प्रोवाइड कर रही हैं, राइट? बट माइक्रोसॉफ्ट, सिंस दे नो द solution stack, they know the environment, they are building this service and they're providing you this thing. ठीक है? So nothing special over here. ये जो मल्टी क्लाउड है, माइक्रोसॉफ्ट की तकरीबन सारी जो डेटा सेंटर लेवल टेक्नोलॉजीज हैं, विच इज लॉगिंग, एनालिटिक्स, अलर्टिंग, मॉनिटरिंग, दे आर ऑल मल्टी क्लाउड. पहले उन्होंने इंटीग्रेट किया एजूर की APIs के साथ, एंड देन दे हैड अ टीम दैट इंटीग्रेट द सेम सर्विस विद AWS, GCP एंड एनीबडी एल्स, राइट? अब उसके अंदर भी, फॉर एग्जांपल, इफ यू लुक एट डिफेंडर, उसके अंदर दो ही दिखा रहे हैं, AWS एंड GCP. लेट मी सी ओवरव्यू. वो OCI नहीं दिखा रहा, वो कुछ और नहीं दिखा रहा. फॉर एग्जांपल, इनका आई थिंक, आई डोंट नो इफ आई हैव एक्सेस टू इट. I don't want to do it actually. So all it is doing is integrating with the APIs of that cloud platform. Nothing special, right? It's just a matter of doing it, and it takes a lot of R&D to do that, right? So that's why it takes time, and they are doing it, and they need to do end to end. So it takes time to do these things, right? सारी जो changes हो रही हैं उनकी सर्विस के ऊपर, they have to monitor that, and they have to update their services to provide to keep the integration proper, right? तो यहाँ पे आप देखो, यहाँ पे AWS है, GCP है, एंड वेरियस डिफरेंट थिंग्स, राइट? और यहाँ पे देयर रेगुलेटरी कंप्लायंस भी हैं. आप कहते हो जी मुझे इससे चाहिए कि मेरा ये am I compliant with this thing or not, for example with these kind of specs. So yes, you can check it from over here. You can apply and say I want to be compliant, or give me my security benchmark across this one. क्योंकि जब आप बिजनेस से इंटरेक्ट करते हो ना, आप कहते हो हम सर्विसेज ये प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं, वो कहेंगे प्लीज प्रोवाइड अ सर्टिफिकेशन फॉर ISO 27001. तो आप क्या करते हो, आप इसको ऑन करते हो और आप देखते हो यू आर कंप्लायंट और नॉट, एंड देन इम्प्रूव योर कंप्लायंस, राइट? आप जाते हो, कहते हो ये एक्शंस लो, आप इसको ये प्रोटेक्ट करो, इसको ये प्रोटेक्ट करो, ये चीज़ करो, एंड देन वंस यू आर कंप्लायंट यू कैन शो दिस रिपोर्ट टू योर अदर वेंडर्स और योर क्लाइंट्स कि जी वी आर फुली कंप्लायंट विद दिस वन, राइट? सो दिस इज़ अ वेरी कॉमन थिंग. बहुत कॉमन चीज़ है जो होती है इंडस्ट्री के अंदर. दे वॉन्ट टू बी कंप्लायंट. जिस तरह GDPR है, वो कहते हैं जी आप डेटा नहीं लेके जाओगे इसको बाहर, देन इट कैन शो यू GDPR कंप्लायंस ऑल्सो. आर यू कंप्लाइंग विद दिस थिंग और नॉट? कोई डेटा कॉपी तो नहीं हो रहा कहीं पे, एंड वेरियस डिफरेंट थिंग्स, राइट? सो इट कैन डू दैट. तो यहाँ पे इसने मुझे सीक्वल का भी बताया था। लेट्स सी सीक्वल के बारे में क्या कह रहा है मुझे ये देखो रेगुलेटरी कंप्लायंस राइट। मैंने अभी यहाँ पे स्टैंडर्ड्स ही मैंने ऑन किए हुए इसके, और इसमें लेट मी सी इफ आई गो बैक ओवर हियर, ये मेरा सिक्योर स्कोर है। जनरली वी वांट के 90 से अबव हो इसको, ठीक है। ये मैंने हाई और मीडियम शुड ऑल बी कवर्ड। If I look at the recommendations, right, so you can see it's looking at my database, और क्या कह रहा है डेटाबेस को कि it is exposed through to internet, तो I need to disable public access. So यहाँ पे instead of going to each service figuring out those things, I can do these things, okay. Anyway, let me just go to the database directly, okay? Okay, we can figure it out quickly. SQL databases. And I'll go to the server actually, क्योंकि सर्वर के ऊपर वो है एक यहाँ पे सर्वर के ऊपर I went to the database. I'll go to the server. I'll show you. I don't know why it is so slow right now. ये मेरा डेटाबेस सर्वर है। लेट्स सी, तो यहाँ पे इट इज सेइंग कि let's look at the network settings, and this is basically what we do, right? I can do maybe this one private endpoint, or I can do selected network. I can do add the virtual network rule, and I can pick, for example, my VNet access from over here only, okay. And after doing this one, I can basically dismiss that one, ठीक है, उसके ऊपर. So this क्या कह रहे हैं? Because subnet of the anyway, I'll take a look at this one later on, or maybe I can do. सो बेसिकली हम वहाँ से डिफेंडर में सारे रूल्स देखते हैं, हमारी वायलेशंस देखते हैं, देन वी कम टू द इंडिविजुअल सर्विस एंड देन वी फिक्स इट, ओके. सो नाउ आई कैन गो बैक इनटू द डिफेंडर, फॉर एग्जांपल डिफेंडर फॉर क्लाउड. उसके अंदर जाके आई कैन फॉर एग्जांपल टेक अ लुक एट दैट थिंग एंड आई कैन रिमूव इट. हो सकता है फिर से आ जाए, and sometimes it does come back because I have not fixed it properly. I didn't go and see what it was telling me to how to fix it, right? I just tried it out, but regardless, right? Let me see. Hold on. Overview, मैं जिसके अंदर जाना चाह नहीं, मैं क्रिएट नहीं कर रहा. मैंने तो सिर्फ ये कहा था, मैं जब गया ना सब्सक्रिप्शन में, मैं दिखा रहा हूँ कि व्हेन यू गो इनटू द रिकमेंडेशंस कि क्या इश्यूज हैं. मेरा पहला इशू था, उसने कहा जी सीक्वल शुड हैव vulnerability findings resolved, exposure to intrend on AKDB01, okay. This was the issue. मैं आपको दिखा रहा हूँ कि हाउ डू वी वर्क. डिफेंडर में वी लुक एट द रिकमेंडेशंस, ओके. उसने कहा जी आपका ये जो है ये एक्सपोज हुआ हुआ है आपका डेटाबेस। ओके, ये मुझे डिफेंडर ने बता दिया। तो मैं वहां पे गया सीक्वल DB01 के अंदर, AKDB01 के अंदर। वहां जाके मैंने कहा कि एक्सेप्ट कनेक्शंस ओनली फ्रॉम वर्चुअल नेटवर्क, राइट। दिस व्हाट आई डिड। तो ये मैं दिखाना ये चाह रहा हूं कि डिफेंडर आपको इट पिन पॉइंट्स द इशू विद द सर्विस and which configuration is causing the problem and reducing your risk score or increasing your security risk, and you can go directly and fix it, right? पहले क्या होता था, आप बाहर की कंपनियां लेके आते थे, वो अपने टूल्स रन करते थे, वो आपको रिपोर्ट बना के देते थे, राइट। हर 6 महीने बाद ऑडिट हो रहा है या साल के बाद ऑडिट हो रहा है विद ऑल दीज थिंग्स, राइट। Now it's continuous audit by the service. It tells you the moment anything happens, you know कि आपने जो कॉन्फ़िगरेशन की हुई है गलत है, या कोई अटैक हो रहा है आपके ऊपर, or whatever, right? This is the beauty of this thing. And you can set somebody as the owner and set the due date. वो आपको उसके ऊपर भी आ जाएगा डैशबोर्ड के ऊपर कि ये इसके नाम है और it is past due. You can do those kind of things as well. आप ये भी कर सकते हैं एग्जाम कर दो कि ये रिकमेंडेशन जो है ऑन दिस रिसोर्स, आई अंडरस्टैंड, आई एक्सेप्ट दैट रिस्क बिकॉज आई एम डूइंग मे बी सर्टन स्पेसिफिक कॉन्फ़िगरेशन that requires this configuration, right? And so on and so forth. There are many things you can do. वो आपको दिखा रहा है कहाँ पे क्या चीज़ है, ठीक है। यहाँ पे आपको स्पेसिफिक वो बता रहा है, ठीक है, क्या चीज़ हुई हुई है। So it gives you lots and lots of information basically that you can have deep down information. कि 2 चेक फेल हुए इसमें से 9 में से और इसके 1 चेक फेल हुआ, राइट। The idea is, what I'm trying to show you is, ये भी मैंने एक डेटाबेस को पिक किया जो डिफेंडर ने मार्क किया था, and how much depth I've gone into to figure out and see what it has found, right? This is the what it is able to do. Imagine आपका पूरा डेटा सेंटर चल रहा है and it is telling you where the issue is, instead of you finding out different things and after some catastrophe has happened, आपको पता लग रहा है automatically, right? So it's really great thing, and not across just Azure, across your whole on-premises, AWS, GCP, wherever. Right? So it's an amazing service. No, अभी तो इसकी जो next level की service है, that is extraordinary. That is expensive service, which is basically called वो उसका नाम है Azure Sentinel. Sentinel is next generation service. वो बड़ी organizations लेती हैं. It can find out आपके network level की जो traffic है, it can do analysis of the network packets and find out if something is happening. जिस तरह हमारा फोरेंसिक एनालिसिस होता है ना, जिस तरह अगर कोई लेट से किसी ने कहा जी जहर दे दिया, ये जहर कहाँ से है, किस में से किसके ड्रॉप्स हैं, किसने कहाँ डाला होगा, ऑल दोज थिंग्स इट कैन फाइंड आउट दोज थिंग्स फ्रॉम द नेटवर्क पैकेट्स के किस कहाँ से ओरिजिनेट हुआ है, किस सर्विस से ओरिजिनेट हुआ है, किस सर्वर से ओरिजिनेट हुआ है, हु वाज द यूज़र, ऑन एंड ऑन, राइट। इट इज़ अमेजिंग स्टफ व्हाट इट कैन डू। आप उसको फायरवॉल के ऊपर छोड़ दो सेंटिनल को, it can find out what is happening on that firewall, data is going from where to where the threats originating. I mean, it can find out everything from the logs. It does deep analysis of the logs of your firewalls, of your network data, and it can find out anything and everything. It's the most amazing tool. So it is an expensive service. And a Sentinel का bill is usually $15,000-$20,000 a month होता है, because data is massive. It needs to do massive analysis on the data, on network, VM data, network data, database. I mean anything and everything, right? So it costs quite a bit. But I mean, this is one of the first thing big organizations do, right? that they do this thing. वो साइबर सिक्योरिटी का एक सेपरेट कोर्स है. इट इज़ अगेन अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग फील्ड, right? If somebody wants to go into that one, but again you have to go deep to be able to go and have a good handle on these things, understand what services are. No, absolutely, cyber security is what it is, right? ये जो हम पढ़ रहे हैं, ये of course we are doing as part of cloud computing, as part of cloud services. But if you're specializing in cyber security, this is you'll be going deep into Defender, right? You'll be going deep into Defender. You'll be mastering Defender, Sentinel, firewalls, and everything, right? So this is a whole field where you specialize in, in the cloud, which is cyber security, right? अभी तो हमने टच नहीं किया किसी चीज़ को, हमने थोड़ा थोड़ा जस्ट वी टच फ्यू थिंग्स. हमने कहा जी फायरवॉल ये करती है, नेटवर्क सिक्योरिटी ग्रुप ये करता है, डिफेंडर ये करता है, राइट? As part of even a lecture, we have taken very small period of time to do that. But you can spend days and weeks on just these tools, right? As part of its own course, as part of its own specialization, right? इसके अंदर ये देखो, यहाँ पे हमने we did not take action के अंदर ये actions हैं. You can go deep into this one. Delegation, exemption, disabling rules, trigger, logic app. आप कोई और ऐप लॉजिक, अगर ये हो रहा है, लॉजिक ऐप एक वर्कफ्लो ऐप आप स्टार्ट कर दो, इट कैन डू सर्टन थिंग्स एज वेल. I mean, there's so many different things, right? And you can see all of those things. So there are many different things, right, on this one. You can create policies, you can see what queries it is giving you, and many different things, right? अभी तुमने we have basically just touched this one. और ये देख लो आपके small amount of resources, look at the amount of recommendations it's giving you, right? Automatically giving you score. So customers can जो CISO है, जो इनका IT security का जो head होते हैं, they can just look at the score and say, okay, this is very low score. Where it was the I think we saw it somewhere else, right? Security posture, this one, and they can simply say, okay, I need it above 90%, and they can review these things and take the tell the remediation action, and they look at these kind of things, right, at a higher level. They set the policies, they set the, for example, appliances and various different things, right? And the guys who are in the cybersecurity team will implement all those policies to make sure this score is close to 100, if not 100. Okay. So they give you a very nice way to visualize these things. This is the important part, right? At a human level, they are mapping these settings to, so you can just visualize the number and see you are not in good shape right now. It's like an average kind of thing. You need to work on this one. And this is what we do actually with customers, right? They don't understand all the things, all the settings, but we like, okay, your secure score is very low. Please work on it, bring it to close to 80-90%. This is what happens, right? उसमें policy definitions आपको update करनी पड़ती हैं, आपको कई चीजें update करनी पड़ती हैं, right? So sometimes you don't want something to be part of the score. वो कहते हैं हमारी standard setting is like this. आप dismiss करो, policy definition change करो, right? And make sure that this doesn't get triggered again.